Welcome to the Paru Zings Appraisers on Purpose podcast. This podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the industry? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back. We're excited once again to have another interesting and just delightful guest. Our guest this week is Hansel Dobbs. He currently is with Aloft, but he is so much more than that. And as we like to always kick off and inquire, Hansel, so were you born this way or how did you get into the profession?
I was kind of born this way.
Kind of born this way. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, my dad, he was originally did wholesale foods, sold food to restaurants and stuff in Dallas. And my mom was an international flight attendant for Delta back in the 70s. They decided to quit their jobs and start a Sonic franchise in Rockwall, Texas, or mid-1970s. And that lasted till about 1982. And he and a friend decided that they were going to get into commercial real estate appraising.
Wow,
and
fascinating.
That's what they did. And so I grew up around the business for the most part and just kind of going with him down to downtown Dallas and going on trips with him across the country to see commercial real estate and help him with residential appraising as well.
That's amazing. So did he have an interest in commercial real estate because of his role as a Sonic franchisee?
No, the way the story was told to me, a friend of his just said that there was going to be a seminar in Dallas about appraising and asked him if he wanted to go. And so the two of them went out to Dallas, attended the seminar, and his friend said, I think I'm going to become a commercial real estate appraiser. You want to do this with me? And he said, yeah, let's do it. And so they ended up selling the Sonic and went all in on commercial real estate appraising.
That's phenomenal. Sell the Sonic and go all in on commercial real estate appraising. Oh, wow. So you got to be the navigator in the passenger seat, it sounds like, driving around to some of Dad's assignments and appointments.
Yep. Did that. Did the whole double-sided tape thing, putting the photos in the reports and the using the transfer sheets to put the arrows on the maps and all that kind of stuff. But I really enjoyed being in the business or around the business because he always had so much flexibility. And so we were able to always do some pretty cool stuff, like go to Rangers games and also just go out on the road and drive around, look at real estate. I always just enjoyed it.
What about that experience getting out, driving around, seeing real estate really connected for you?
Well, it was just, he was doing commercial. And so it just seems like every time he was doing something, it was always something really interesting and different, whether it was a golf course or a strip center, the Denver Trade Mart up in Denver. He'd go on these trips and come back with photos, buildings in New York or who knows what. And then of course, when we were home, he was also doing some residential appraising. And so I'd get to go out and see houses with him and play around on the computer with him, doing the reporting software as it existed back in the 1990s. And it just kind of drew me in. It's something that I understood inherently all the way up till I went to college. So it was just something that I was drawn to after I graduated.
That's quite an experience, as you said, being able to even be exposed to what software did exist back in the 90s. For those that might be a little bit younger, what was it like back in the 90s? I mean, you mentioned some of those trademarks of a previous era, such as putting the arrows on the physical report, an actual physical report, not one that's created in the PDF, and then actually having double-sided tape, which for those of you that never made a vision board, you probably have no idea what he's talking about, where you got to get one thing to affix to another and you're not using Scotch tape in the corners.
Yeah, so the printers back then were incredibly loud to the point where he would need to announce, I'm about to start printing, because the house is going to get loud, and he would need to do 2 copies. So he'd start printing, and then he would put the 2 copies on a 6-foot table, and then I'd go pick up the photos, and he'd put them all in the order they needed to be in, and then there would be the maps. He'd put pencil notes on there about where the arrows need to go. And so then my job was to assemble. So I would double-side tape all the photos in. I'd do all the transfer, get a pencil, and just rub out the little arrows where you wanted them.
Yeah, love that.
And then I'd take the whole report, and then they had a big hole puncher for the spiral bound thing.
Oh, of
The
course.
spirals on it. And so at the end of the whole project, you end up with these 2 big commercial appraisal reports. So that was
Love that.
I've done that quite a few times.
Oh my gosh. To give some people some sense of size, because it's helpful. People are visual people, and we're just having a podcast recording here. What would that be comparable to? Would that be comparable to, like, say, the size of a Big Mac, or is that comparable to, somebody's iPhone? Like, how big in terms of thickness were those reports that Dad was printing the house over?
Oh, I mean, the ones that he was doing were probably anywhere from half an inch to an inch thick.
Wow, that's significant.
Like books.
Yeah.
Of course, in some cases, I think when he did the Denver Trade Mart, those were 2 or 3 1-inch.
Wow.
So really big. And that took 2 MAIs to do, 2 commercial appraisers. Yeah. It was a big project.
That's so from an early age, not only did you get exposed to the composition of reports, literally the composition of reports and the compilation, but also what I hear you saying is that it sounds like, was it your dad or maybe people that your dad worked with had invested further in their education and got designations?
Yeah, so he went to work for a firm in downtown Dallas, and just went straight for the MAI, I believe. I mean, it took longer, I think, back then, but I think he got the MAI in 1992, 1991.
Good for
so
him.
It took him less than 10 years. But yeah, he got the MAI along with some other guys there at the firm. But I mean, along the way, he was doing residential appraising as well. So I remember when Apex Sketch came out. So I started jumping into that and playing around with it. My dad had me I was doing a lot of the residential sketches for him, but eventually I think he just figured it out himself.
Got it. So when, inquiring minds want to know, when you would get to join your dad to a property visit or an assignment, did you have your own title?
No. No, I'm just along for the ride. I'm just there to be told. I just did what I was told to do. Hold the tape. Yeah. No, I was free labor. That's what.
There's a lot of free labor out there in the family environment. Yeah. Whether you hear about Gary Vaynerchuk working for his dad at the wine library, or the wine store as it used to be, or anybody else, with a farming background, all about that. It's like, hey, you want to eat tonight, kid? You're going to help make sure we get the work done today.
Yep. That's basically the way it was. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So before you ever even got into schooling, let me maybe just jump ahead for everybody else's benefit. Did you ever work in any other industries, or because of your exposure with your dad, you ultimately ended up in the industry?
Yeah, I haven't worked any. Well, I mean, my first job was at a car wash.
You mean he let you leave? That's amazing. I'm surprised.
I made a little extra money on the side in high school, and then I waited tables all the way through college. But also, I think it was my junior year, I started doing a little bit of site appraising because I was out in Abilene, Texas. So I found an appraiser out there. He took me under his wing, and I was able to start training while I was in college. So I was doing some just here and there side work, make a little extra money. And then I graduated and came straight back to Rockwall, Texas, and joined his firm, and just went right into appraising.
That's fantastic. So at a young age, not only were you exposed to it, but you were also recognized as a card-carrying member of the profession, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, that's all I've ever done, except for washing, drying cars off and waiting tables.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. We've all had those kind of jobs. I mean, I remember taking physical inventory for companies as a one of those lovely extra income kind of jobs. It's good stuff. So what? It's kind of interesting experience. What for you? Obviously, getting exposure from your dad and then getting to go work from someone else. What did you realize that you had learned when you actually did go to work for somebody else that you may not have appreciated or understood until you were working at a different place?
I knew the vocabulary. So nothing that he was saying was anything that I was saying. What does that mean? What's an REO? What's a comp? I'll be around family and I'll throw these words out and I'm like, what's an REO? A foreclosure. What's a comp? Oh, it's short for comparable. It's just we do.
What's that?
We do speak a language that takes maybe, I don't know how long, but takes some people longer to learn that language. And so I was able to just kind of show up on the scene and walk up to an appraiser and be like, I know how all this works. I know we need 3 comps in the grid at least. We need 1 listing. I know what a location map is. I know how to do a sketch. So it's kind of an easy sell when I walked in the door.
Oh, I think that makes it straightforward. How did the process evolve for you in terms of developing value? I mean, obviously you got a lot of exposure at home, and then as you go to work at other firms, how did that contribute to you expanding your ability to appraise properties?
Well, and my dad, with his background in commercial appraising, by the time I joined his firm, he'd been commercial appraising for, I don't know, 20 years, doing some pretty big stuff. And he was a really good writer, very good.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And so when I started actually doing appraisals for him, he really held my toes to the fire on my writing. And what I quickly realized, I thought I was a good writer coming out of college. I thought I was. But he just, tore my appraisals apart. He's just, keep it simple, stupid. That you could write this whole paragraph in 1 sentence. You misspelled this. You missed a comma there. This is before a lot of spell check and stuff. So it was, there weren't those tools. So he really kind of dialed me in on how I should be doing the writing and the kind of language that we should be using. Because we do kind of write in a weird way as appraisers. We don't really write the way
it's true
normal people would write. So it's kind of like a mix of descriptive writing and a little bit of legalese. It's got that little bit of a legalese spin to it. And so that took me a bit to learn. But I learned that. And so that writing ability that he instilled in me has really been beneficial in my entire career. And so even with my boys, I try to really teach them writing and push that on them, because I think just being able to communicate and describe your thoughts is going to be good no matter what you get yourself in.
That I've heard many a person say that the value of a liberal arts education is learning how to think and how to communicate, which sadly, 144 characters doesn't exactly get it done.
No, you got to be able to write. You need to be able to read.
Those are big. Those are big ones there indeed. It's like, what? You got to be able to do that? Like, yes, you do. You got to be able to do all those kind of things. Wow. That's amazing. So when you went to work that firm nearby, how long did you stay there before your next opportunity came up?
I was with that firm. Oh, so the firm after I worked for my dad. So I became certified, I think, in 2004. And I found this firm up in North Dallas with a bunch of guys my age. Oh, we were just all having a really good time. We had like a little golf putter in the middle of the office. We each had our own desk.
You guys were you were definitely ahead of the time there for all those tech people out on the West Coast talking about putting greens and foosball tables in the office.
It was a really well-oiled machine. It was a fun office to work for, and they allowed me to also get some of my own clients. And nice. But yeah, I fit in really well there. At that point, I was writing really good appraisals from all my time working with my dad. So I had the whole system down. And then I picked up my own client for the first time. It was Syntex Home Equity, and I was doing foreclosure work for them, which I really liked because you can go out whenever you want. The fees are really good. And I was finally getting the entire check.
Oh, wow. What an interesting. Now, was this because you were part of the firm, or is this because of if you brought the what you hunt, you get to kill and eat, or how did that go?
No, the firm, they would fill my plate with basically I had to give them precedence, but they didn't have enough to fill my plate. Okay. So I was allowed to go get my own clients. They would get their own clients, and I would always give them precedence over anything that I did. But I picked up this one client, and I was really happy doing the work for them and getting the full check. And so, but one day they called me, the manager there, and he said we had a review appraiser quit, and we really like your writing. And we saw that you're in Dallas, and we'd like to see if you'd like to come in and interview for a review appraiser position. And I said no, but after further thinking about it, because I was about to get married, and I thought, well, it'd be nice to have the benefits. And so I went and interviewed for it, and the interview went really well. I liked the manager, and they hired me. And so ever since I got on as a review appraiser there, I've been kind of on this side of the business.
Got it. That is such an interesting perspective. What I take away from that is you had taken the time, invested the effort, and were fortunate enough to be around people that really had an attention to detail. You talk about the importance of being able to communicate effectively and efficiently, and then taking that with you. And as a result, people recognizing the quality of their work, so much so that the unsolicited opportunities show up.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I didn't know. I mean, I was just kind of, if you grow up with a father who's just really making your writing and editing it really heavy like that, you just adapt to it and get better and better and better. So that's been a real tool in my toolkit during my entire career. But yeah, it got me that first job there. And I think when they called me to interview, they didn't realize my age. And so when I walked in, I was a young guy. So I think that took them a little bit by surprise, but they're like, hey, he knows how to appraise. He's a good writer. Let's go ahead and hire him. So I got in there and started doing really good work on review appraising. So things took off from there.
And what type of assignments were you reviewing?
Oh, so those were these were appraisals where I think there was a higher level of risk. I think they're piping them over to us depending on the loan to value ratio. And this is also before the housing collapse. So there were a lot of 100% loans.
Yes.
And some maybe even 101% kind of loans and stuff. So these were high risk deals. And so they were sending those over to us. And this is, so I was looking at the whole situation and seeing if it made sense or not. And of course, back then we didn't have the tools that we do now. So I was limited to online research. There's no RealQuest at the time. There's no.
Oh, I was just gonna say.
No, there are no tools. You're just looking at the appraisal itself and just saying, does this make sense to me? Did they explain everything? Do these comps look similar? You're basically just, it's just the appraisal itself that you're reviewing. And of course, review appraising has got so much more kind of in depth now with the technologies that are available. It's very different today.
That is fascinating from that standpoint. To give people some understanding of what was not available then compared to today, how would you actually even perform any amount of data or data analysis or research as you were reviewing?
There was nothing. I mean, really, you're just looking at the appraisal just itself, and you're either giving it the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If you give it the thumbs down, they would basically go and probably get another appraisal.
I see.
There just weren't that many levers to pull, but when I went to LandSafe, after Syntex Home Equity, they had a lot more tools. They had RealQuest.
Oh, okay.
So we had more tools to use. We had, but they were just a much bigger AMC, much bigger operation. So they had more capabilities. And so we were able to do some more digging into things, looking at public records via RealQuest and call some things out, get the appraiser on the phone, get revisions done, stuff like that. So it was much more involved operation.
And for those that are not familiar or haven't been on that side of the profession that you've been associated with, what is RealQuest and what information did it provide for you?
Yeah, so RealQuest, basically what it did was it pulled transaction data from public records and then would serve it up in a way that was searchable. So you could do, say, like a radius search around the subject property, and it would show the transactions. I don't think it was all that accurate for places like Texas or New Mexico that are non-disclosure, but they'd also embedded a lot of public record data. So it just gave you a little bit more. It didn't have the photos of the properties. You didn't have interior photos. At one point while I was at LandSafe, Red Bell came along and was selling their platform, and it was a much more robust system with mapped MLSs. And that kind of was my intro to the company I would soon work for after LandSafe, which is Red Bell.
Oh, actually, so an opportunity did show up to go and work with them.
Yeah, so their salesperson came on site and did their whole sales pitch, and I got to see the demonstration of Red Bell, and I was really, really impressed by it. So when I got laid off from Countrywide after the housing collapse, I went back out into the field with another appraiser that I knew, and we were appraising, and I saw a job ad for a contract role with Freddie Mac on behalf of Red Bell. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm familiar with Red Bell. I like their technology. I really like what they built here. And so, yeah, I'm going to apply for this. And so I applied, and I got that position and started working for them on the 1-year contract, which then ended up me being there for about 7 years.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Fascinating. So because of the exposure that you had from a previous opportunity, this door opened up, and, you were a well-suited candidate.
Yeah. I knew, my background with LandSafe really served me really, really well. My background in appraising served me well, my writing skills, and also just having exposure to the Red Bell platform on a limited basis, because we were mostly just using RealQuest when I was at LandSafe, mostly because of the cost was a lot better. But after seeing Red Bell, we always kind of wanted to use Red Bell because it was such a good system. But yeah, so then after I left LandSafe, I got the opportunity to interview and get a job there at Red Bell, and that was a really great experience as well.
That's amazing. And with that experience, how did your responsibilities change moving from LandSafe over to that role ultimately with Red Bell?
Yeah, so my role really expanded at Red Bell quite a bit. Red Bell was my first opportunity to really see tech in real estate appraising.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I saw a little bit of it at LandSafe because they were doing some kind of interesting stuff there, but they weren't doing what Red Bell was doing, which is really trying to build a really amazing review platform. And so I was able to contribute to that. I was able to consult with Fannie and Freddie Mac on their REO valuations, different kinds of BPO reconciliation products that we were building at Red Bell for these kind of clients. And then that led into a leadership role where I was over a team doing all these reviews. So that was my first management position. And then from there, we decided to get into desktop appraisals. So I helped develop out those products, design them, build the nationwide appraisal team and panel that would do them for these clients, whether it's for, we had a whole litany of clients doing, ordering desktops from us. But we ramped that whole thing up over the course of 6 months, and from nothing to getting some orders, and we were just handling it and assigning them out to appraisers across the country and getting them done. So that was a really fun experience. And so I was able to help kind of evolve those desktop appraisal products until I left Red Bell after 7 years.
It's a great thing I hear you touching on, where by being open-minded to a new opportunity, you were able to utilize your past experience and step into something that was, in one sense, both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time.
Oh yeah, no, I think I'm always finding myself in very uncomfortable places. I'm sitting there going, this is very, very hard. But then at that moment, or I don't necessarily know everything about how to do this, but at that moment, I'm always kind of thinking, well, that's also kind of a good place to be, because I'm going to learn a lot here. I just have to push myself and figure it out. And so every time I've put myself in a position where I'm surrounded by people who are smarter than me, who know more than me about something, I'm a little bit out of my depth a little bit. But then I just work really, really hard. I catch up. I learn from other people. I don't really mind being, maybe I had to put it this way, but maybe the dumbest person in the room. I'm all about learning from other people.
Sure.
So, but so I was able to learn a lot from that experience, and And it was also that experience at Red Bell that kind of showed me just what was possible with appraising. I don't think I really saw it at LandSafe. I was just so locked in on 1004s, 2055s, 1025s.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to LandSafe, or I got to Red Bell, I was like, oh my gosh, with all this technology, I mean, as long as you just have those 12 or 13 things in there that are required by USPAP, kind of the world is our oyster. We can create all kinds of valuation products. So
Yes.
I've always thought that was interesting.
I think that's a great revelation that a lot of people, they might hear it when they're entering the profession or going through a required USPAP course, or they're going through some CE, but it's a very different thing, as you touch on, to take a step back and say, all right, well, as long as I do this, for instance, as long as I put gas in the car, I can drive somewhere. Now, granted, it's 12 or 13 items, it's not just gas. But as long as I have some like these core things, I've got a lot of flexibility to go do a lot of other actions or opportunities or solve problems in a way that, like you said, is not limited just to the confines of a particular form.
Yeah, there's an appraiser here in Dallas that's created a really slick solar panel valuation system that I got to see recently. And so he's finding some people who are just curious about what's the value of my solar panels. I was like, see, there you go. That's a cool product.
Yes. A way to apply some of what you've learned or something that you're interested in. Speaking of which, what type of properties were you all typically valuing when you were with Red Bell?
Oh, residential. Just
all residential.
Okay. All 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
We had a pretty big panel of appraisers who like to do desktops for us, and that system made it really easy for them to do it as well. So, but I mean, those kind of deals were mostly secondary market kind of things. So you're talking, I think, capital markets, portfolio type of stuff.
And if I may, so that's, again, another thing a lot of people may not have perspective on. They're just accustomed to, hey, maybe I received an appraisal assignment and here's the client. But those couple, in this case, uses of the reporting or the report conclusions, evaluations, make for a much larger industry to serve. Did you know those even existed before you took on that initial contract opportunity?
No.
With Red Bell, working with Freddie Mac?
No, and there's probably a little bit of confusion when I say the word desktop.
Yes.
So it's not the 1004 desktop or the 1004 hybrids that I think people know about today. That's for more lending work. These desktops are, so there's an entire other side of the market. Whenever you lend on a property, now you have this loan that's going to have this entire life to it.
Yes.
And it gets bought, it gets sold, ends up in this portfolio or that portfolio. And these big portfolios get bought and sold in the capital markets, and big rental portfolios. All kinds of stuff is happening on the institutional side. And these clients, they do not have time or the budget to go and order 5,000 1004s. It's just not an option for them.
Got it.
So, but what they do need is they need an appraiser. They need an appraiser to look at data, and we don't want any of the fluff. We just want, what are the best comps? What's the value? It needs to be USPAP compliant. So here are the 12, 13 things, but it's very much there's no 1004 MC. There's no driving anywhere. So that's what they need, but they need it in mass. So when they say, I'm looking at buying a $2 billion portfolio of mortgages, they'll carve out some percentage of those to say, we need values on these and we need them by Friday. And
wow.
So because they're trying to make a decision on a big purchase or selling something. So it's a different product, it's a different client, it's a different market. And on that side of the world of appraising and valuation, there's a whole bunch of companies that all have different products. There's no just one 1004. It's all kinds of different stuff. And so it's definitely a different side of things. And there's a lot of appraisers that just specialize in it. They don't do any lending work.
And I think that's a great point. When someone, I should say an entity, is buying, say, a $2 billion portfolio and they need some amount of analysis, do they actually need appraisals, or do they just need, some type of like, I'm gonna call it a reality check, but hey, is this, are we within a percent of variation that we can stomach for the purchase?
Yeah. So the way my understanding is they'll get the portfolio in a spreadsheet, and they'll divvy that spreadsheet up into pretty much 3 tranches. There's the ones that they'll go the AVM route. There's a bunch of them that'll go down the BPO route and they'll order BPOs.
I see.
But when it comes, and then most of these companies all have their own kind of rubric and way of slicing and dicing up the portfolio. But when it comes to the harder stuff, they're going to reach out to an appraiser. It'll be a smaller sliver of the entire pool, but it's going to be, hey, we need actually somebody, we need an appraiser in this case. We need somebody who knows what they're doing.
It's great to hear. It's great to hear. A lot of people don't know that exists out there.
Yeah, ultimately, we are the best trained people in the country to solve the toughest real estate valuation problems there are. There's really nobody else.
Yes.
So, I can see where AVMs are playing a bigger and bigger role, especially on easier stuff. But when it comes to the really hard questions, there's just nobody else that stands in that gap.
I think that's extremely important. And you mentioned early on, which I think is fascinating. I didn't miss a beat when you mentioned it. Probably everyone getting an opportunity to hear a little bit about you and your background didn't miss it at all when you mentioned, like, what are the letters REO? Outside of it, people have no idea. But obviously you've gotten a decent bit of experience around those properties. How has that been a part of your learning and also contributed to your perspective on valuation?
Yeah, so that contract role I had with Freddie Mac and then eventually Fannie Mae as well was doing REO reconciliation. So that was during that housing collapse or right after it. And so there were a lot of these assets out there and they were just rolling in by the hundreds. And so I was able to work with the GSEs on how to value them. And it was really an amazing learning experience, just getting exposure to that, and how to estimate cost to cure over and over and over again, and get feedback on our results, stuff like that. So over time, you start to really figure out what are people spending on carpet, new kitchens, drywall.
Got it.
And I think without that exposure, a lot of appraisers tend to underestimate what some of those costs are. This stuff, it costs money to redo an entire house. And it depends on, you have to also understand your client. What kind of level of quality are they looking to restore it back to? Some clients would want just kind of like a basic rehab. Some clients say, we want to rehab it all the way up to market standard, even if it has granite countertops. It just depends. So you have to understand your client, what are their goals, and that's going to influence that cost to cure. And then from the cost to cure, you need to understand, the way I always kind of looked at the market data, it looks kind of like sediments of layer or sediments of dirt.
Yes.
So you slice up a market and usually there's this lower sediment layer, which are your REO and short sale assets. And then somewhere in that data, there's a little bit of a gap up and you'll hit your core trend. And then there's another gap up, and these are the ones that are all renovated. And so you just really have to get used to looking at that and making sense of it to say, here's our as-is value, here's our as repaired value, here's the cost to cure, here's the entrepreneurial incentive or profit margin that an investor would be looking to get from it. So you're just doing this over and over and over and over again. So I've certainly processed my share of REOs. But that's not really where the work is at today, but who knows where the market's going to go from here. But it's certainly an interesting product.
Well, I think to your point, one thing a lot of people don't realize, and again, I commend a number of people do, but I just think back over my various periods of time around the industry, and when I've been more in touch with certain pieces of data or information, or even had access to information, I think a lot more people share information now than they used to. And I know it was such an eye-opener, even back in 2005, 6, and 7, that at any point in time, somewhere between 0.5% and 1.5% of the housing market is in some form of distress at any point in time. Now, historically, we're actually below that. We're at a historical lows hardly ever seen in terms of what we'll call distressed properties. And some of them truly sit in the REO category, a number of them don't. But that the idea that they're non-performing loans, people are like, oh my gosh, It's like, well, they're always out there for any number of reasons. And to your point, obviously, during the great financial crisis, things spiked up and they became a much larger percentage than we'd ever seen before in most people's lifetimes. But that there are fundamental characteristics that are generally similar. There's physical distress and there's financial distress. And that doesn't mean just because it's distress that necessarily it's damaged as a property, but it may be the encumbrances to it or what's actually causing the owner a problem. So you touch on being in touch with the market for the physical side of that distress, measuring it, accounting for it, the impact, how are people going to deal with it or resolve it. What an amazing...
Well, there's also, a lot of people don't realize that the FHFA, they take foreclosures very, very seriously. They want to see neighborhood valuations being protected, and they hold the GSEs accountable to that. And because of that, you really do need appraisers on a lot of these transactions, because you need that unbiased opinion to come in and say, what's the most amount of money I can get for this asset? We don't want the value where we're going to put that value on and some investor's going to buy it in 24 hours because you've probably lost money on it. And now you have a transaction in a neighborhood that can start to weight down other people's valuations. So the FHA says, no, we're not fire selling foreclosures here. We're not going to just harm the valuations of neighborhoods. So they watch that very, very closely. And so it takes an appraiser to look at the data and the days on market, cumulative days on market, and make sure that that valuation makes sense and it's going to result in an actual market transaction.
For anyone that's ever had the challenge or the opportunity of being involved in one of those experiences, it's very different when you're in it and in the pressures of both like wanting things to go quickly and maybe not going as quickly as you want versus being almost like an armchair quarterback, kind of viewing, well, here's how I think it's going to be. It's very different from when you're in the trenches. Wow, that is phenomenal. So over the course of time that you were with Red Bell, you mentioned about being able to contribute to what was going on, as well as to consult on how things could exist or be improved, as well as even create new valuation solutions for clients. What else did you develop as a skill set or your own learning while you were there?
That was my first exposure to management.
Okay.
So, and I think anybody that gets into managing other people, it's always hard at first, and it's another skill that has to be learned. And so, like I said before, it's, continuing to just step my foot into things and decide that I'm going to learn how to do something and be willing to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes and just keep going. And so that experience, once I left Red Bell, I went to Consolidated Analytics, where I was now the chief appraiser. So
oh, wow, okay.
Took that experience, that management experience and product, building experience, and took that to Consolidated. Managed some people there, a review team. And that was really kind of a traditional chief appraiser role, I also got to create some pretty cool desktop appraisal products there as well. And those still exist today. And then from there, I decided, I'm getting into my 40s, and I still wanted to have my own appraisal firm.
Got it. Yeah, I got it.
Like my dad, he had the office on the square in Rockwall. So I was like, I'm going to do this finally. And I've seen enough to where I think I can do a really good job. I can serve my community well. And so I started down that road, and then I got a phone call from a friend. This is where networking comes in. It's always nice to have friends. A friend called me and said, you need to talk to Travis at Aloft. And I said,
oh, okay.
I said, where is this? It's in Seattle. And I said, I'm in Dallas, so I don't know about this. He goes, she's just talked to him. And I said, okay, I'll talk to him. And he flew me out to Seattle, and I met him and the team, and it was a startup. It was VC backed. They had real engineers, really good engineers. And I was like, oh, this.
You mean the type of engineers that go out and build bridges?
No, the kind of engineers that can build really good applications. And I was like, oh, this looks like it would be a lot of fun. And I really liked the vision that he had. And so yeah, I decided to join them as their chief appraiser. And they had a team of staff appraisers as well. We still do. But they help inform our technology that we build. And that vision that he cast now 2 years ago, I think I joined Aloft almost just 2 years ago. And so we finally put out our product, Toolkit, after 2 years. And it's now on the market. And we started with a vision 2 years ago, and it was pretty much a new company, to now we've built something that really does, I think, is going to make a big impact on adjustments in the residential appraising world.
Fascinating. When you mentioned about 2 years ago, when you had that first meeting, came about through networking, what was the vision that was casted that encouraged you to consider coming on board to what otherwise is something relatively new and not proven?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in the industry for a while. I've been around the tech stuff, and all of the technology that I've seen, it solves problems. But I had a lot of ideas myself. I know he did. And I wanted to work on something big, something that really makes a big impact, a big splash. But when you start to talk about some of those kinds of things, the barrier has always been, at least in my experience, is that you need the elite engineers to do it with.
Got it.
And it's like, oh, that's a great idea, but we don't have much of a budget. We don't have an engineering team. We need to patch this together with that and this free solution with that. And we can try to make it work a little bit like this. And so when I joined Aloft, they were like, no, we're going to actually build a legitimate professional application, and we're going to do something big here, and we're going to really impact the adjustment world and appraising in a big way. And I was like, I mean, once you meet these engineers and what they're capable of, you're going, this looks like it'll be fun. So this isn't just bubble gum and tape. This is the real deal. And we've built something that really is very professional, very well decoded, very well built. And it's been a lot of fun working with those engineers over the last 2 years.
That's great to hear. What was the succinct version of the vision that Travis shared with you that had you want to come be part of this?
Well, he basically cast the vision that we want to make a big impact to the appraisal industry and bring something that helps appraisers do adjustments in a much better way, much more consistent way than we do it today. So we've always, I think as a profession, we've struggled to get to some of the harder adjustments. And so when we looked at the landscape of the appraisal industry and said, what's the big problem to solve here? Well, it's not time adjustments. It's not putting photos into the report. Me and some of the other appraisers, we basically said it's the adjustments. We don't feel comfortable, just kind of ballparking it on some of these things. Some of these adjustments are really hard to get to. And maybe we could get to it with traditional means over the course of many, many hours and many hours of research. We could probably try to figure it out, but we don't have that kind of time. So we went into it from that perspective. It's like, let's help appraisers get to the hardest adjustments, whether it's a rural property, a suburban property, manufactured multifamily, whether, it doesn't matter if it's a small MLS or a big MLS. So that's what we went down the path of, not knowing exactly what the solution was going to be, but that's where we started. And then we met Heather Sullivan, and Heather Sullivan brought her set of skills to the table, and she's played a huge role in developing out the solution. And it's been just a blast working with her. So it's been a big team approach. And of course, Heather and I being kind of your subject matter experts,
sure,
we're sitting there at the table with some incredibly smart, talented engineers who are also coming from all these other industries like Amazon and Microsoft. So they bring a whole different set of skill sets and knowledge. And we're all just sitting there talking adjustments. And you just kind of pinch yourself and you're like, wow, we're having a really big conversation here about adjustments that I never thought I'd ever be in, but here we are. So yeah, but I think we really put something together that I think, as the word gets out about it, appraisers start to play around in our system, use our tool, they'll find that it's a repeatable process that helps them support every one of their adjustments. And we're going to keep making it better over time. But that's kind of the vision. That's the world we've decided to play in, and we're just going to keep making it better and better and better. We want it to be the best adjustment tool in the market.
Got it. And then with that approach of, getting started from being around your dad and seeing valuation firsthand, and being at that fixed end of the tape measure as he walks somewhere off in the distance around a property, to getting to the point of getting to now work with a firm and help lead a firm that is looking to revolutionize, as you talk about, what I heard you say, the adjustments for the appraisal. What has you most optimistic and excited about the future? Because you're clearly in a space that the vast majority of people don't know about, and probably them hearing this podcast will be the first they've ever heard that this type of activity is going on, much less where you're hoping to contribute and lead the industry.
So I think my experience in all the years I've reviewed appraisals. So first of all, the adjustments are the one thing that we do better than anybody else in the country. There's really nobody else other than us appraisers. So that's kind of where I start. But the problem though is that work that we do, when we do it, it oftentimes doesn't find its way into the actual appraisal product. And I think it leaves clients a little bit wanting as to where are these numbers coming from. And we're also just in a more modern age where people want the transparency. Borrowers want to see more evidence of what we did and how we got there. And I think this is the biggest hurdle for our profession. And I think that if we can find a way to not just support the adjustments, but build that into our appraisal products to where it's more of an analytical product, that it will increase the reputation of residential real estate appraisers and increase the value of our products and services. And so that it's not an easy task, but I really feel like if we can make our products more valuable on the adjustment side, that I think it would benefit every appraiser in the country that's willing to make a little bit of a change, spend a little bit more time on the adjustments. But I'm not naive at all as to the challenges there. I know that there's time crunches and clients that want to hit certain numbers, and there's all kinds of internal challenges to our profession. But I think if we can find a way to get to the point where it's a much more analytical process, data driven, and we can upscale our products, that there's going to be there's a benefit there at some point. At least that's my belief. But also it's just opening up the world for appraisers to more products and services. So that's just kind of the path I put myself on to try to make my little bit of a difference in this world. So if I can contribute to other appraisers making more money and making more money per product, then I feel like I've been a success.
I think that's fantastic, and just enlightened to hear what you're doing, but also your reason why you're doing it. What are some of the biggest initiatives at a high level that you hope to accomplish in the next the next 1 to 3 years, given that you just recently rolled out this technology to the marketplace?
Well, I mean, we rolled out the first version of it last month, and we've already gotten a lot of users on the system. And of course, anytime you launch, you give somebody a new technology, especially when they really like it, their first reaction is, I want this and I want that and I want
scope, expand the scope. We want more scope creeps.
I want to do this and I want to do that. And you're just, okay. And we do, we take all that in, we put it all on a big list, and we have to then look at it and go, well, I don't, because I don't understand coding, but the engineers look at it and go, that's really hard. That's easy. And it's kind of like shopping a little bit. You have to go down the list and say what makes sense. First of all, you have to go through the list and say what makes sense for everybody. You can't just make sense for one person. But yeah, so we've got a lot of work to do over the next 3 to 6 months, just ingesting all the feedback and dialing it in and making it a lot better. And then from there, we're going to continue to grow our user base on the adjustment side. We're working really hard to create exports that are very well designed
Oh, okay.
that explain all the stuff that you did in our tool. So it's one thing to actually do the work and get the numbers, but we want to try to take away some of that burden of explaining it so that you can just take the verbiage and the exports and you can just put it right into your appraisal and you're just, I'm done. This is where the numbers came from. Here's the charts and the graphs. So that's something we're actually working on right now. We're going to continue to expand into more MLSs. I think we're in about 20 of the biggest MLSs in the country. So we're slowly mapping every MLS in the country so that when you come into our experience, when you load that appraisal in there, it just pulls the data from the MLS for the comps and from your report. It's a much more, I don't know, it's got all the MLS photos, the public data, or all the research that you'd ever want to do. You can just do it right within Toolkit. Yes. And that's going to be that's a lot of work. Yeah, that's kind of and of course we're looking at, how do we get this into the hands of the, banks and lenders and what they think about it. And they've got staff appraisers. And so, yeah, we're just going to keep kind of exposing it to the marketplace and keep trying to make adjustments better.
Fantastic. And so kind of thinking about maybe next steps for those that are coming across this conversation for the first time, what does this mean for somebody in their market? Is this something that would be additional opportunity for them to use, to be a part of, to be employed by? Like, how do they come away? Do they come away excited for what you're doing? Do they come away scared? Because that's obviously one of the questions that may be on a number of people's minds. So like, wow, this is interesting. Like there's some people really out there doing technology and valuation work, not just, I cherry picked 3 sales out of a market area and called it a conclusion of value. So give us that perspective to the extent you can, please.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you completely map all your comps to your grid, you're happy with those details, that's where Toolkit comes in. You export the XML, upload it to Toolkit, and start actually doing the adjustment work. We kind of take the burden from there. It does still require an appraiser. There's no automating this step. You have to understand those comps. You've got to make sure that those extracted site values make sense against one another. It's like a really nice calculator, but you have to actually be the appraiser who's using it. So you can't just give an HP12C to a toddler. Like it takes someone who knows how to use an HP12C to use an HP12C. So, but it's a very powerful tool, and it's for appraisers who understand, depreciated cost data, effective age, which we all do. We've all taken that training. That's why we built it for appraisers. Sure. But I think it's also, I think the part that some appraisers that are currently using it don't realize that they could do with it is it's so well designed, it's so well built that in these times when there's not as much lending work and you're trying to go out there and get non-lending work, that I think there's an opportunity for somebody to use our tool, especially like our paired sales tool in there, to go around and teach real estate agents what we do as appraisers. How does paired sales work? How does depreciated cost work? You can really kind of use it to do demonstrations and stuff, teach classes, put yourself out there as the person that is the expert real estate appraiser for that marketplace. And hopefully that makes you some more money as well. The other thing that to know about Toolkit is starting January 1st, we will have 24 hours of CE credit built into it, including the app update course. Yep. So you can join the tool, and that'll be part of the tool as well.
That's fantastic. Wow, that is absolutely amazing. And Hansel, where can people find more information about this? Since this, like you said, 2 years ago didn't even exist, and here it is. You're out in version 1.
It's loftappraisal.com. And right there, as soon as you get to the page, there's a get started button, and that'll take you all the way through the path. And once you're into Toolkit, there's some registration links in there. So you're always welcome to join one of our weekly webinars, Q&As, and we're going to be doing more and more webinars over time, just teaching different aspects of adjustments. So we're just going to keep digging into this aspect of appraising over the coming year.
Fantastic. And just maybe one final question in closing, and that is, given where you started, not everybody's going to have the benefit of working for a family member who sells the Sonic burger franchise and goes out and gets into commercial appraising, both feet, as they would say, just diving right in the pool. But for those people who maybe have a consideration or an interest in the profession, what guidance would you offer them? Whether they're brand new, like maybe yourself, coming out of an educational experience, or they're thinking about midlife career change, or like, I want something more interesting, fulfilling, more that suits my needs. What guidance would you offer from your experience so far in your time around the profession?
So I'm really a big believer in state coalitions. I am I'm a member of the Association of Texas Appraisers, and we have a lot of trainees that show up at our happy hours, at our mid-year meeting or annual meeting, and they show up with business cards. They're putting their hand out and shaking our hands, and they're meeting us and introducing themselves to us. I mean, if you're gonna bring on a trainee, that's the person you're probably going to reach out to first, because they're making the biggest effort, and they've joined our state coalition. They're getting involved. I think that's the key to it. It's just, when you join those state coalitions, the people who are members of those, they know everybody. It's a bit, it's not, I think there's 2,000 residential appraisers in Texas. You can fit us in a basketball stadium. So there's not that many of us. So we all kind of know each other. And so if you just show up to these state events and you meet people, it just requires some networking. Plus you'll get to know, there's usually people be like, I can't take you on as a trainee, but I'll tell you who you do need to talk to. This would be the person you want to train under. Tell them that I told you to talk to them. That's how these things happen. So attend these events, or attend Appraisal Institute chapter meetings. Those are happening in every state. Depends on if you want to go commercial or residential, but those are also amazing appraisers to get to know. But just put yourself out there, get involved, make a business card, show up, meet people.
That's fantastic. Hansel, I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time joining us here as part of this season's guests. It's always great to hear perspective and guidance, because no one person's path is necessarily just like another. And we always appreciate those who have continued to put themselves in a position to learn, to grow, and to contribute. And I definitely come away with that sense as well. So I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Well, everybody, that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of Perusing's The Power of Values podcast. Please continue to generously share. Like this, of course, go on right now and like this and send it out to another. And of course, thank you. And until our next episode.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing life paths and achievements of our guests. Don't forget to like us on LinkedIn and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.